Unspoken Issues.
Welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. My name's Jesse Starcher, sitting here with Chris Armstrong. Chris Armstrong, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well.
All right. So we have another poll that we put up here on the Unspoken Issues podcast Facebook page. This was another one that you chose. Do us a favor and kind of explain what you did here and why you did it.
Well, I mean, out of convenience, largely, because I actually was I've been reading the Nightwing run from the 90s via Hoopla.
Yeah.
I think I've suggested it before, but yeah, Hoopla is great for comics. There's a lot of good stuff on there. But they've got several volumes of the Chuck Dixon Nightwing run on there. I had just started rereading that, and I've kind of wanted to do Nightwing on the podcast for a while, so I figured this would be a great time. And I also really liked the Robin run that Chuck Dixon also wrote earlier in the early 90s. Nightwing was more of the mid to late 90s. So, yeah, I just kind of went through and I figured since I wanted to do each of those books, I just found a Nightwing issue that had Robin and a Robin issue that had a guest star of Nightwing and kind of put those against each other.
Okay. All right. We have Nightwing number 6 up against Robin number 8, and we have Nightwing number 6 coming out on top by one singular vote, at least according to what I'm seeing now. I don't know if it was...
Yeah, I think that's what it ended up. It was kind of strange because, like, it started out like 6-0 Nightwing. So I was like, well, I thought Robin would get some votes.
Yeah.
And then over the next few days, it slowly like became a tie.
Uh-huh.
And then somebody towards the end, Nightwing got another vote to kind of secure the win or whatever. But
okay, well, I mean, do you have a preference here between Dick Grayson and Tim Drake? I know the least about Tim Drake, I'll tell you that much. What's your thoughts on either or of these? I mean, break it down for us.
Well, I think my favorite Robin is probably Tim Drake, but I like the Nightwing character more. I just like Nightwing. I like Dick Grayson as Nightwing, as his own, man, sort of doing the solo hero thing. And I like Tim Drake as the sidekick, as the Robin sidekick. Jason Todd, I don't have any affinity for, really. I thought it was lame when they brought him back with Under the Red Hood, although that did result in the Under the Red Hood animated movie, which I think is like the best one DC's ever done. It's really good. But as far as like the character of Jason Todd, I thought bringing him back was kind of cheap, kind of like Brubaker did the same thing with Bucky and the Winter Soldier, which is obviously hugely successful.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a bad idea when it happened. I still think it was a bad idea, although I like a lot of the stuff that's resulted from it. Just the idea that like death it's always been kind of meaningless in comics.
Yep.
But like in the last 20 years, it's become even more so. And like some of the sacred comic deaths, like Bucky and Jason Todd, Gwen Stacy, even to an extent with Spider-Gwen being around now and a big deal. Like it's become even more of a joke. But anyway, that's kind of a rabbit trail. So
I follow you though, 100% follow you because I mean we're doing a 90s podcast. We can talk about how, and we may have on podcasts in the past where death was pretty much broken in the 90s when Superman died and came back.
Sure.
So you're right. It's become less and less significant for a character to die because you're just like, okay, well, I'm going to be able to pick up a book probably in about 2 or 3 years. This character's going to be back in some fashion.
There are some like big Marvel events where a character will die in that event and he'll be brought back to life within like 6 months. And like, you use that death of a character to like provide an emotional impact, but then you totally negate it 6 months later. It's just really, it's just annoying.
I need to read the actual story, but I know the death of Wolverine occurred. You're thinking, oh my goodness, Wolverine, that's a huge character. He's going to die. Well, it's like they softened the blow because they had Old Man Logan running around. We got to have Wolverine in some fashion, which I understand the storytelling aspect of having Old Man Logan trying to run around in place of Wolverine. But again, Wolverine is back, right? Didn't he return?
Yeah, he's since returned. I don't know what happened with Old Man Logan. I'm assuming he died at some point. I don't know.
Well, we're obviously putting in lots of work for the Unspoken Issues podcast. We have little time.
Exactly.
Little time for things that happen in the here and now. So yeah, like I said, Nightwing number 6 gets by with 1 vote more. That synopsis is coming right up, but first let me talk about Amazon Music. You may not be able to find Nightwing's popular punk-infused carnival metal romp Bloodhaven's Bloodbath, but you will be able to find Nightwish's 1998 album, Oceanborn, that has tracks such as Moondance, and get this, The Riddler, and Night Quest. If you head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M network, you can get a free 30-day trial where you can check out over 70 million songs. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M network for that free 30-day trial. This came out, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Its on-sale date was January 2nd, 1997. Our creators, writer Chuck Dixon, penciler Scott McDaniel, inker Carl C. Story, letterer John Costanza, and colorist Roberta Hughes. This was titled The Visitor, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. The name of the story is called The Visitor.
Have you ever read any of the Nightwing? You said you haven't really.
No, I'd love to hear some about it.
He had been his own character since, I guess, the early 80s when the new Teen Titans book that was like the famous run that Marv Wolfman and George Perez did. They transitioned Robin into Nightwing, and he became Nightwing in that era. And I think he might have had a couple of miniseries. At least I know he had at least one before this. And then they launched him in his own title in the mid-90s, like in 96, I guess. And that's when they debuted the suit that he's got in this issue with the blue Nightwing symbol on the chest. Really simple, sleek design. And at the time, mid-90s, I'm like 15, 16. I got one other buddy that's really into comics. We can't buy everything. So the Nightwing was a book that he was collecting that I would just read he would just let me borrow all of his issues or whatever, and I would read it every month along with him. And then later, I think into the 20s, I started picking it up on my own. But that was a series that he kind of shared with me, and I got really hooked on Nightwing at that point. That's when I really became a big fan, because I didn't know a whole lot about the character outside of that he was Robin, the original Robin, and he had kind of graduated into his own role there. Or in the early issues of Nightwing, he gets sent by Batman to Bloodhaven, this new city, because they know that these corpses that have been like coming into Gotham through the river, he knows that they're coming from Bloodhaven, which is like a sister town.
Oh, okay. All right. That's mentioned in this book. I didn't know I know he said the bodies were showing up in the harbor, and he was investigating that, but I thought he was talking about locally. So it was actually floating down to Gotham?
Right.
Okay.
And so Batman kind of sent him to trying to figure out what was going on. Looking back, it's a little cheesy that like Bloodhaven is supposed to be like Gotham, but way worse. So like it's even more crime ridden and even more corrupt than Gotham. But at the time, I thought that was really cool, and it gave Nightwing like kind of his own city to kind of patrol. And even once that case was kind of solved, he decided, he was going to stay in Bloodhaven, and that became his kind of home base of operations, for the whole series.
Okay, all right. So Nightwing number 6, The Visitor. So Nightwing, Dick Grayson, is just getting off of work in order to start patrolling the streets of Bloodhaven. The city is a criminally corrupt town similar to Gotham. However, those in powerful political positions lean towards villainy. I notice positions in law enforcement are kind of corrupt. We actually meet one of those in the comic here. Just as an aside here, outside of Hogan's Alley, the bar Grayson moonlights at as a bartender, he finally meets Bridget Clancy face to face, as apparently in their past, the only interactions they've had, Grayson never got a good look at her while she was working as the superintendent at the apartment building that Dick lives in. Now, this is apparently a supporting character that returns in future issues. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So not a whole lot. I think they're just kind of planting a seed here because she doesn't show back up here later in the issue. But
the interesting thing about Clancy is, he got the apartment in like issue 1 or 2, and like in every issue since then, he'll talk to her, interact with her, but she's always got her face hidden. Like she's got her head under a sink, working on something, or she's carrying a big stack of groceries so he can't see her face. Like it's kind of a running gag. He loves her accent, and he can see her figure and everything, but he never can get a good look at her face until this issue they finally reveal Clancy.
Yeah, and it's funny because he turns around and he immediately immediately assumes that it's the redheaded girl who obviously there's an Irish accent that she carries. And so he immediately assumes it's her. And it turns out it's this lovely Asian lady. Anyway, she's got the Irish accent, and it throws old Dick Grayson for a loop here. But anyway, they part ways, and pleasantries are exchanged, and Dick heads home to find his apartment has been broken into. The perpetrator has not left, allowing Dick to get the drop on them. But it turns out this is the current Robin, Tim Drake. So Tim tells him he's there just to visit and catch up, and perhaps a little crime fighting on the side. Dick lets him know about the 21 dead criminals that you had mentioned there. I think he mentions there was a total of 21 bodies that were dumped into the river and have apparently it's due to something that's happening in Bloodhaven. Plan is to try and find out who was behind it, and that involves visiting a local lawyer to get some more information. So Tim tags along. When they show up and begin to interrogate the lawyer, making sure to drop the name Dudley Soames, a crooked cop. And if you know anything about this guy, his head is still on straight, which I did some research and I learned a few things, okay? And I'll bring that up here in a few. Sure. But anyway, Dudley Soames drops the name Dudley Soames in order to fool the lawyer into dropping some info. He tells the pair of a money drop that is going on at a laundromat in town. So Nightwing and Robin stake out the laundromat, unaware that Soames had spoken to the lawyer after their visit and have been ready for their appearance. Impatient as nothing has been happening, Robin, Tim Drake, swings down to put a tracker on one of the crook's cars, and this happens just as Nightwing realizes they have been set up. The car explodes. Able to reach Robin in time, Dick dodges a hail of gunfire and is able to take out the shooters. Disabling the crooks, Nightwing and Robin take all of the money there and throw it into the burning remains of the car. Nightwing decides to call it a night, knowing that tonight's adventure has thrown a major wrench into the criminal activities of Bloodhaven. In a small epilogue, we are treated to a young tattooed man who appears to be a captive criminal, revealing all sorts of underworld secrets that he is aware of to a long-haired, shadowy figure. The undisclosed man assures him that he will become the ruler of Bloodhaven and that the captured criminal is of no use to him any longer. Grabbing both sides of the prisoner's head, we are led to believe he crushes it off panel. And that's where we leave issue number 6. So there's a lot more that happens in this issue, and I guess I'll kind of throw it to you because you're a little bit more prepared, I guess, since you've read what's come before. But the relationship between Tim Drake and Dick Grayson, how old would you say Tim is in this comic?
You know, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking he's like 15 or 16.
He's got to be, yeah. He's got to be.
I know in the Robin solo series, he has like a Robin mobile, like a little sports car.
Okay.
And I think he's not old enough to drive it, but he does anyway, obviously. But I don't think he has a license. That was several years before this series, but I'm thinking the age range he's supposed to be in is like 15 or 16.
Okay. And then Nightwing, obviously a young adult man. So, yeah, I mean, do you have any insight? What do you think about the relationship here between Tim Drake and Dick Grayson?
Yeah, it was cool to see the interaction with these two because I wasn't a huge, I like Batman and I read a lot of Batman comics even in the 90s, but Nightwing didn't show up every issue or even all that often. And in a lot of the solo Batman books, Robin wasn't always around. So I think the only time I'd ever really seen these two interact was in this Nightwing series, at least up to this point. And like they have this little rooftop convo. They're, eating chicken soup out of a thermos, it looks like, or some kind of soup. And it's a cool insight. Like Dick, obviously, in this series, he's still got some hard feelings towards Bruce from like when Bruce had his back broken, in that Night's End storyline, he didn't give Dick the mantle of Batman. He gave it to Gene Paul Valley,
which
is a big mistake, obviously. You see a lot of resentment towards Batman from Dick in this series. And you can kind of see it bleeding through a little bit in this conversation with Robin, where he's like, did he send you here to check up on me?
Yeah.
The one thing that kind of bugged me is they're kind of talking about how who's better suited to be Robin. Tim says, I'm happy being Robin. I'm not going to be a superhero when I grow up. I'm just doing this for now.
Yeah.
Basically the stance he takes.
Yeah, it was interesting to read that. I mean, again, I don't know much about Tim Drake, but just from what I got from this issue, he apparently came to Batman and said, I want to be Robin. He specifically says, I wasn't chosen. I asked to be, when the other side of things, Dick Grayson was chosen by Batman to become Robin.
Yeah, that's not the part that really bugged me. One part in their interaction, him and Nightwing were talking about their roles as Robin and who was the better Robin, basically. And Tim says, "I'm not half the detective you are," which kind of goes in the face of like what Tim's character is, because he is a great detective. That's one of the things that made Tim such a great Robin. He figured out who Batman was. Like, that's why he's Robin. Maybe this is just Dixon trying to put some humility under Tim's character here. But I think, when I think Tim Drake, I think, he may be a better detective than Batman one day, not much less Nightwing, who's really more of a, athletic, acrobatic, superhero who kind of more of an action-oriented character.
Yeah, your concern is validated, at least from other people that I had read after they commented on this issue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were other people, and I think somebody specifically wrote that quote out and just kind of like shook their head. They didn't understand why he would say that. But yeah, you're right. Maybe he's trying to be humble and get on Grayson's good side or whatever. But
yeah, it seems a rare misstep for Chuck Dixon, especially since he wrote the Robin, series earlier in the '90s as well. So
yeah.
But I don't know. That just kind of stuck out to me and kind of irked me. But that's like kind of a minor complaint, I guess, because you can kind of headcanon. You can always kind of say like he was trying to make Dick feel better, basically.
Yeah. Well, let me read. I'll read a little bit more of this conversation. This is another part of it, I think, or what leads up to it. But Tim says to Nightwing, he says, "You're really on your own here. I couldn't handle that." And Nightwing's like, "Well, sure you could." He says, "No, I couldn't. We're not the same kind of Robin." And Nightwing asks him, "What does that mean?" And Tim says, "Well, you're a natural athlete. I have to work at that. I mean, it's like you're at home 10 stories over the street." And then Nightwing's like, "Well, you're more cerebral. You're better at the computer stuff." And Tim's like, he's got Oracle for that. And he goes, "I'd trade my computer literacy for your street smarts in a hot minute." So it's interesting to see how they're so different, but were put in the same role to help Batman. Regardless,
it seems more like Tim's point of view is more like he kind of stumbled into this role, as Robin, and it's kind of like a part-time job or a summer job for a young guy, and he knows like it's not going to be his career, but he's enjoying it, and he likes what he's doing, but he knows down the road he's going to be doing something else.
Okay, Dudley Soames. So Dudley shows up. He's the crooked cop that puts a hole in the lawyer after the lawyer shows up to tell him that, hey, guess what? These guys are snooping around, and I gave him a bunch of information. So I was like, well, I'm going to look up this guy because maybe he's more of a supporting character as issues go on. And the first picture I bring up is of this guy called Torque. Okay. And I'm like, Torque, wait a second. Who's this? His head is on backwards. So do you have any idea what occurred that caused this? Oh, please tell me. Please tell me.
Well, going back and, this is the first time I'm reading this series since, the 90s, pretty much. It's kind of cool to like half remember a lot of this stuff.
Sure.
So I see Dudley Soames pop up in one of the early issues. Like, oh, I remember Dudley Soames. He's like the crooked cop that Nightwing deals with early on. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I get to a point where there's going to be some spoilers for later in the series. Sorry for the 30-year-old spoilers, guys. But at the end of this issue, the shadowy figure shows up, and you see he grabs the guy's head, and you hear the crack sound. He actually isn't smashing the guy's head. Okay. He's breaking his neck. So, and I think maybe even a lot of the bodies that were recovered in Gotham may have had their necks broken. I can't remember. That's how this guy deals with, people. So Dudley Soames gets in his crosshairs in a few issues from this, and that's his fate. He has his neck basically he has his head completely twisted around. So the guy's trying to break his neck and kill him, but he survives.
Okay.
So when they find him and find out, they realize he's still alive, because you see somebody laying on the ground with their neck or their head spun around, you're gonna assume they're dead. Yes. And then like, wait, this guy's still alive. And I think for some reason they can't fix him. They can't like twist his head back around or he will die. So he has to live the rest of his life with his head on backwards. So he's got this weird mirror contraption on his head that like allows him to see forward and stuff like that. So a really weird kind of wacky character he turns into.
Very strange. So I want to read this tiny paragraph from DCFandom.com. So this is after he gets his head twisted around. They discover he's still alive, his windpipe remaining undamaged long enough for him to be moved on to life support. With the help of Dr. Sandra Sandra Pavar, Dudley Soames was saved via drug therapy, while sophisticated microsurgery was able to reattach his nerve endings so that he could move again, even if turning his head the right way around was impossible. Using mirrored glasses, he was able to teach himself how to walk once more. So how do you walk like that? Once he had regained a degree of his old mobility, he then strangled and killed Dr. Pavar, nice, and sought revenge on the shadowy figure. And do you want to name him, or are we going to name him?
I mean, fine. Yeah, sure. It's
Okay. Blockbuster.
Who I think he was a Batman villain who decided to take over Bloodhaven because Gotham was going to be too tough a row to hoe. I'm not sure. He may have been another hero's villain, but he becomes like the kingpin of Bloodhaven, basically, and becomes kind of Nightwing's nemesis throughout the early part of the book.
Okay. So, yeah, and the other little thing here is where there's a little section that says paraphernalia, and it says equipment. And the sentence says, wears glasses with mirrors in them to allow himself to look ... forwards? Question mark. The only reason I went to go find this was because I looked up Clancy, Bridget Clancy. They said, well, yeah, she becomes a supporting character. I was like, oh, I wonder if this Dudley Soames becomes the same thing. And I was like, holy crap, what did I just step into? But yes, this is clearly before any adjustment, chiropractic adjustment by Blockbuster.
I'm pretty sure this issue, like this conversation with the lawyer where he shoots him, is like kind of a line crossing moment for Soames, because obviously Dick has interacted with him already and he doesn't trust him, thinks he's a dirty cop or whatever. But how bad is he? I don't think you really know until this issue when he just like shoots this guy in cold blood. Okay. And then it like becomes obvious like that he's not going to be an ally. He's going to be a nemesis for good.
Okay. All right. The only other little bit I had here was just about Bridget Clancy. I mean, I looked to see if she became more important. There's some feelings between her and Dick Grayson, but I think it doesn't go much farther than that. There is, by the way, I'm on writeups.org, Bridget Clancy. Despite their romantic missteps, Grayson convinced Clancy to return to her old life project, studying to become an actor. He pulled some strings to have her get a scholarship from the Wayne Foundation. Bridget Clancy is now again a student, and that's kind of it. I mean, they mentioned that she had a few interactions. She was the superintendent for that apartment, and they listed her tenants, which is funny. Her tenants are John Law, the pulp novelist who was once the masked hero called the Tarantula, who I swear I saw something earlier that said he was a vigilante that is somehow involved in this story. So
I believe that's the case.
Wink,
I mean,
wink.
again, I've only read like the first 8 issues of this on my read, so
okay.
A lot of it I'm just kind of trying to remember from 25 years ago.
The gigantic amygdala, once an enemy of Batman, but now enjoying a most normal life due to a medication efficiently controlling his temper. Gigantic. I've got to see a picture of this. Like, I'm curious as to whether it's an actual human or if it's like this piece of brain. I better put DC Comics because I came up with a lot of different.
Right.
So they got him on the cover of Detective Comics 659. Anyway, he's beating the crap out of Batman, and there's a bunch of there's a few rogues. Of course, this is Nightfall #2. So this is early on before, as he's meeting up with Bane pretty soon. And then what was the other tenant? Dick Grayson, and then we have the enigmatic Dr. Feldermaus, a virtual ID used by Nightwing to rent another apartment. Just reading this, the most interesting part for me was the conversation between.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of the meat of this issue, really. It advances some of the plot lines along also, but like the big takeaway from this book was the rooftop, interaction between Robin and Nightwing, I thought.
Yeah.
I guess we could talk a little bit about the art. Scott McDaniel is the penciler, and this Nightwing series is the first time I'd ever really seen anything that he had done. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big fan. He's kind of hit or miss on some of the other stuff I've seen of his, but it seems like his Nightwing run is kind of him hitting on all cylinders. He had done some Daredevil stuff before this. Actually, the issue we were supposed to cover like a year ago, I believe he was the penciler on that issue. I forget which issue number that was, and then he did like an Amalgam Comics issue. I think Assassins was the book he did on that. And then post Nightwing, he's done a bunch of other stuff. Got a pretty interesting penciling style. A lot of the, you'll see characters smoking. There's like these really thick wasps of smoke kind of everything's really like the smoke is really pronounced. The issue where they're kind of interrogating the lawyer in bed, the light is really, he's got these really bright globes of light. When he's putting the flashlight on his face and stuff, he does a really good job with like the action sequences where you'll see a character jumping like off a balcony, doing like a parkour off a wall and then off of a trash can and then doing a flip down to the pavement all in one panel. And he does a lot of those with Nightwing, where you kind of can see the path he takes, with these acrobatic moves and stuff.
Specifically, I don't want to take the panel from you, but I want to look at the one where it's Tim and Nightwing flying through the sky. Just taking a look at that. If you pick that apart, the panel layout's interesting. Really, it looks like you're almost looking through a gun sight, I guess, maybe a scope on a gun, because it's got this outline around the side, but Nightwing's foot is breaking that barrier. So it's like he specifically made a point to put that in there for it to be able to capture. What is the circle? Is that anything other than?
I don't think it's.
It's nothing. It's
just
a panel. I don't think it's
anything. I think it's just an artist's choice, sort of.
Which is great. I think it looks fine. Yeah.
And you can see it in that panel specifically. You see all the bats in the background, kind of following Nightwing. He does that a lot. Like even in there will be scenes where it's like, why would there be bats there? And it's just like an artistic flourish that he likes to throw in. It seems like, and I think it works pretty well.
I guess if we're going to talk about the way faces look or his characters look, they definitely feels more like there's a slant towards what you'd see animated wise, instead of realistically. Art for me, I didn't have any problems with the art, man. There's sometimes I'll get a book and I would just be like, why am I reading Trencher? I have no idea because I can't figure out what the hell's happening. Sure. This is not it. This is a good choice.
So is that your pick for the panel?
No. I'm giving you free reign to pick whatever you want, because that would be pretty easy. I might be able to come up with something else.
Yeah, I'm going to pick that one.
All right.
That would be my pick, would be the shot of Nightwing and Robin kind of swinging on their lines through the cityscape there.
That's clearly the shot of the book, dude. I know when he was putting this together. I mean, you said the first 8 issues. Does Tim hang around for like issue 7?
No, it's a one and done for Tim on this one. Now, he does come back in a later issue. It may even be Nightwing 25, but there is another issue similar to this later down the line where, if memory serves, like the whole issue is just like a conversation between Tim and Dick. But I can't remember exactly what issue that is, but it's later on.
Okay. So if Scott was told, look, you're going to be doing an issue that's featuring Nightwing and Robin. Well, I mean, he's like, okay, well, that's the shot. That's the shot that he probably first came up with. He's like, I cannot wait to draw both these guys swinging in the sky together. I'll go with the dream sequence. So
yeah, that's cool too.
Yeah, it's Nightwing's trying to rest, because I mean they were talking about how he has 2 jobs, which I assume one of them is just the job at the bar, and then the other one is being Nightwing.
Yeah.
But, okay. He's on the roof. He's getting some rest, and he's having nightmares. Now, maybe you could help me pick this apart, because what do you think is going on here? Is he remembering something in this dream? He's trying to save somebody because he says the boy's falling or something, or maybe he's falling. I can't remember. He says, my fall is controlled. The boy's is a plunge. He shouts to me. He always shouts to me. Gravity pulls him further from me. Mm-hmm. I never hear what he says, and then he's woken up. That's when. So what's he thinking of here?
Well, I'm of 2 minds. One, it could just be him thinking back to his parents who died during like an acrobat routine.
Okay.
Where their line was cut and they fell to their deaths. Or it could be Jason Todd. I think the following issue, or maybe the next one after that, there's a Scarecrow issue where he's kind of trapped in like a dream state where he's dealing with a lot of issues as far as psychologically, and Jason Todd's a big part of that in that issue. So that's probably that's what I would think this is supposed to be kind of hinting towards, is him kind of feeling guilty for what happened with Jason Todd.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, when I read it before he fell asleep, he had that conversation with Tim.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, is it Tim that he's seeing?
Like he's worried that's going to happen to Tim.
Exactly. Like Tim is uncontrollably falling headlong into something that it could potentially lead to his death, which obviously the way that this is set up is that this kid is falling from a great height and he's going to hit the ground. Robin, which I assume, I should say Nightwing, who is dressed up as Robin in this dream, right. I assume that's him, is trying to save this kid and is unable to do so. But the thing is that the conversation that happened before this didn't lead me to believe that Nightwing was really worried about Tim Drake being in any type of danger. Like he couldn't handle himself. It seemed like Nightwing was pretty comfortable with Robin being able to handle himself. Either way, that was my take on it. Now, here's the thing. I read this one issue. You've read a few other issues. We're absolutely just throwing stuff out there to try and interpret what we're seeing. The good thing is that anybody who listens to this podcast can go over and let us know what actually is happening here. Maybe there's something we're completely missing. Maybe this is something that happened out of Nightwing's past that he is reimagining through his dream or re-experiencing through his dream. And like this could be this was Dick Grayson's long lost brother or something. I don't know. So if you, ladies and gentlemen, have an opinion or some facts that we are completely missing for this Nightwing issue number 6, head over to the Unspoken Issues podcast Facebook page. Hop on. You can either just leave a comment there or you can hop onto the poll that this was on. Should be able to easily find it and leave us a comment and let us know what you think this is or what this actually is and how we're supposed to interpret it. So
is that your panel, the full page dream sequence?
Going with the full page dream sequence. You want to break it down and you want to talk about bats. There are some bats flying through there. There's, we have the unmitigated terror on whoever this child that's falling their face. And of course, Dick trying to save them and just unable to do so. I like the story it's being told on this page, and I like how it's being presented again with the circles, which is pretty cool. That's a neat way of paneling something out without being, oh goodness, what's the word? Traditional. That's the word. And a lot of times when we're in these 90s comics, you see a lot of people breaking the traditional modes of comic book storytelling, and I like it. I think it's pretty cool.
Cool.
I have a question. Okay, Cody Walls. Anybody you know?
That's a buddy of mine.
Okay, all right. So I can't vote until Blue Nightwing or Red Nightwing is specified. You come in, you say, you should already know Red Nightwing is banned from anything I have a hand in. So what is this about?
When they did New 52... man, damn near 10 years ago now. They relaunched all the DC books with new number ones, and Nightwing had a costume change where it was basically the same costume, but instead of the blue wing symbol, it was red. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, well, that's different. I don't really like it. But I didn't make a big deal about it, really. But eventually he changed back to the blue eventually. And I remember at some point, I don't even know what we were talking about, but I made kind of an offhand comment to my buddy Cody about... Yeah, I guess it was when they brought back the blue costume, and I was like, "It's about damn time," or something like that. And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, it used to be red, and I didn't." And I basically made a big deal out of it, even though I was kind of joking around or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, the blue is way superior to the red costume, in my opinion. And he started out with like this. The original Nightwing costume, I think, had like almost like a disco style, like really open chested look.
Yep.
And then there was one that had like a gold wing, kind of like a gold armor plating over the chest, and then it got streamlined into the black and blue costume for this series, which is easily the best.
I'm looking at an image that compares both the blue and the red right now.
I mean, who's a fan of the red? Get out of here.
It really like channels some Batman Beyond for me for some reason.
Yeah, you're right. It does.
Because of the black and red, I assume. And
Bloodhaven, they kind of created that city for this series. And then in Infinite Crisis, the big crossover in 2006, I think, they blew up the city. So with a character that was nuclear, I think Chemo was his name, blew up, the entire city. And they were, I think in the early days of planning Infinite Crisis, they were going to kill Nightwing, but they decided not to do that. Maybe he was going to die in Bloodhaven. But yeah, they destroyed the entire city, later in the line. And now, in the new continuity, it's been brought back, since then. So
that's crazy. So, okay, what other comments did we have here? So I saw, Bailey's taking credit for breaking the tie. He says he came in and Nightwing #6 took the lead because he came in and voted for it. I think I mentioned about how I'd never read the full run of Night's End. I've always wanted to, but I've never had the chance to sit down and read all of it. That is one of those books that honestly, I wanted to follow that up with. I remember I don't want to say mass hysteria, but I remember the excitement of Batman getting his back broken, and how I found that issue on the stand at a grocery store when it was just nobody could find it. I remember I just happened upon it, and I'm like, holy crap, there it is. I'm surprised I didn't buy all 4 issues that were probably sitting there, but I bought it and I went home and I found me a bag of the board and I put it in there. I was so excited. I actually had found this gem out in the wild, but I never read anything that led up to it. I think I remember Sam Keith was involved in some of the issues. I remember seeing his artwork, I think, on some of the covers.
Yeah, I think he just did some of the covers.
Okay, all right. So certain, I'm always a fan of Sam Keith's work, so it's pretty easily recognizable. I didn't see any other comments on here. Was there anything I missed?
I think that's it. Normally when we have a poll, especially one that's close, we kind of throw a bone to the other book.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about it, but I did not get a chance to read that Robin issue before we recorded. Like I said, Chuck Dixon did the Robin book in the early 90s, and Tom Grummett was the penciler on that, who I'm a big fan of. So I'm also reading that series as I'm kind of going back. It's also on Hoopla, so I'm going back and reading a lot of those, but I haven't caught up to that point before we recorded. So I'm sure it's a good book. It's a book it's a Robin issue that has Nightwing and Batman, and I believe Azrael Batman also is in that issue.
Ooh.
It was probably part of the Night's End crossover whenever Bruce was trying to get the mantle back or whatever. But I'm sure it's a good issue. So sorry we couldn't talk about it.
Yeah, it's got the blue and gold Nightwing on the front there, and Bruce Wayne, murderer.
Those what is it? Nightfall.
I'll get an answer. Hold on.
While you're looking it up, I had the bookstore for about 4 years that I ran, and a lady brought in a bunch of old books to trade in this box with all these like paperbacks and stuff. There were these 3 phone book size trade paperbacks of the Night's End, like the 3 the 3 sections. They each had their own big like phone book size trade paperback, and I was like, oh, these are going home with me as soon as I
yeah, buddy. I think I remember that. It was
so I gave her I gave her some store credit or whatever, and I immediately took those home, and I still haven't read them. They're still sitting on a shelf. That was about 2 years ago. That I've got to get around to finally actually reading all those trades. But
Nightfall, Night Quest, Night's End. There you go.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure to go give the Unspoken Decade page a good look-see. You're going to find a lot of articles over there. Just type in any comic book character, comic book, and most likely you're going to find something that happened in the 90s that the Unspoken Decade has covered. So check that out. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be having a podcast right now about 90s comics. Did someone say Unspoken Decade? The place where you need to go to check out some great articles about comics in the 90s? This would be a good time to plug a sponsor of the W2M network, and that is Grammarly. For you, the listeners of Unspoken Issues, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. Also, check out the Unspoken Decade Facebook page. All sorts of great... I love going through my Facebook feed and seeing the covers that every once in a while me and you will put up. We also have Dean Compton, and of course Simba Fan puts some content up there, generating conversation, and some great covers from the 1990s. So check that out. Also, props to the W2M network for hosting the podcast. Also, Chapter Select for hosting the tweets that we put out. That's a joke. Shout out to the Rattleitch Broadcasting Network as well. And hey, go check out the Unspoken Issues podcast Facebook page, and you can interact with us. You can vote on some of the upcoming content. Just recently, I threw a post out there to get suggestions for future polls from the people that are in our community. We got about 30 or I think maybe even 40 strong now in our community, which is great. Got some great suggestions for some upcoming podcasts, for some upcoming polls, and then we'll see what the podcast become, because it's all about our friends who enjoy 90s comics, and we try to get you as involved as much as possible. So we got some suggestions from our previous guests, Evan Bevins. I don't think Mark's had a chance to get on here yet, but I guarantee if we pick one or have one of Mark's polls up, he's going to join us for a show.
Awesome.
Matt Cooper, a good friend of ours from the House of Gozer podcast, gave us some great suggestions involving Milestone and Milestone Comics and an Image comic as well. And I think we even had some. I can't remember if anybody else chimed in. I know Evan took it upon himself. He took it upon himself to throw some suggestions our way. But if you haven't had a chance to read Evan Bevins, give us what for in regards to Ravage. Yeah, his article is posted on our on the Unspoken Issues Facebook page. So go check that out. It's a fun read, and of course, Ravage gets his due. Perhaps I don't know.
The 3 Ravage fans can finally bask in the glory of Ravage #1.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. So, I guess you can follow me at Stiznarchy if you do so wish. And Chris Armstrong, feel free, sir, to plug your stuff.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at BirdieMan34. Also, free plug again for Hoopla.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know what it is, it's a free app that you can work with your local library. Just Google Hoopla and it'll tell you what it is.
Support your local library for sure.
Yeah. Yep. It's a lot of free comics on there you can read. I'm always reading comics on there now that I've got that app, and you can read the whole Nightwing series pretty much from the 90s through the trades they have up on Hoopla.
Okay.
At least on my local library. I don't know. I think other libraries may have different stuff. So Hoopla may not be the same everywhere, but either way, there's going to be some cool stuff on there for sure.
All right. Well, for Chris Armstrong, I am Jesse Starcher. We'll be talking to you soon. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one. Bye-bye.